Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is still Tuesday, January 27th, 2026. It's just after 3 o'clock, and we are going to hear from the Agency of Administration and get their budget. And red, is this, are all the ones now going to have this as the color? So everybody's going to run out of red ink all over the state. Supplies were included on the red ink.
Let's wait.
I hope that the red ink doesn't mean red ink in other ways, just that it's a pretty picture that you want to
Use it all on the cover.
people, So, introduce yourself and take it away, please.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Nick Kramer, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Agency of Administration. Great to be with the committee again. Thank you all, as always, for your time. Folks will remember this is probably the most exciting budget in state government. Always is. We've got lots going on. I say that only half facetiously. I mean, the Secretary's office, the business unit I'm going to talk about today, actually does have a lot of kind of idiosyncratic pieces. It's maybe non-traditional just in the sense that it's often the place where things land when they're kind of an orphaned budget item without a home. So we do a lot of kind of miscellaneous and other duties as assigned, often by this body, right? But I'll speak to that a little bit. But before I get started, I always want to start off with a shout out to the team. Speaking of this beautiful budget book that actually puts this and every other budget book for the Agency of Administration together, Financial Services Division, whose budget, incidentally, I'll be covering today, consists of 10 people. We have 40% of them with us.
As a result of you all being here.
But they just do a fantastic job, and I don't think I need to stress to this room how much work goes into creating a budget and specifically these materials. They work tirelessly this time of year, and they've got 16 different budgets that they present and sort of own as a small team of 10. That number often that is growing. They took on the Labor Relations Board this year. And so that, again, to the point that things have a way of landing in the Agency of Administration. We're a customer service oriented agency, and we're always looking to support state government in any way we can. This team really exemplifies it. So this cover too, I didn't mention your Senate counterparts earlier. This, I believe, is from a local Vermont photographer. Somebody in the team follows, and so very obviously beautiful picture. I do believe it's the bulk of the red ink from a budget perspective.
I hope so. And then this is also just, I'll mention this, the first year we've changed what we're asking agencies to present to us. So you're the first one who gets to do this. So
right.
Looking forward to seeing how all that worked.
Well, I appreciate the committee's forbearance. If I stray or if old habits rear themselves, I'm not planning to spend a ton of time in the attachment B today. The ups and downs form, I understand, is out in 2026. So I'll give sort of a high level overview. And again, the team's done a lot of work to pull together, I think, a lot of what was requested in that September memo. I'll set the tone, I guess, since I'm the first one. Unfortunately, as you'll see with a number of departments, that guidance from the legislature, just the timing it was a little bit after our internal budget instructions went out in the fall. So there's maybe this year a little bit of misalignment in some cases in terms of the format of certain reports. But I think FSD being a great example, everybody across the executive branch has done their very best to try to provide what's being asked for, and we'll treat it as an ongoing.
Right. We are not expecting perfection in year one, but progress, good progress is important. And we're all learning actually as we try to do this and become more accountable. So great. Thanks.
All right. So then diving in, if it pleases the chair, I am going to, I don't know if it's possible to bring up on the screen or if folks have, I'm not going to be looking at it, but just if that's folks' preference. I see everybody has a printed copy. I'm going to be walking through the budget book, starting with the slides, which look like this. So just a quick refresher for the committee. I'm sure this is mostly familiar territory, but the Agency of Administration generally consists of a bunch of different departments, even the Department of Finance and Management, whose commissioner you just heard from, the Department of Taxes, libraries, buildings and general services, human resources. Those all sit within AOA. And those commissioners report up to the secretary. I am not going to be speaking at length about their budgets today. I'm focusing primarily on the central business unit, which consists of the secretary's office, financial services division team that I just spoke about, the Office of Risk Management, which is a mighty team of 3 people, the Office of Racial Equity, which is, of course, a growing and important part of the work that we do. So that structure is laid out on the first slide here. The secretary's office has the sort of the core secretary's office proper, for lack of a better word, is another small but mighty team, myself, the secretary, the deputy, and our executive assistant, Chrissy Gilhooly, who may be a familiar face to some folks. She's been fantastic. And so we're that sort of core team. It also includes the chief performance office. That's Justin Kenny. And Katie, his colleague who run that shop and do a lot of work statewide. The chief prevention officer is Monica Hutt. She works very closely with the governor's office and is primarily embedded in their operations, but she is part of our budget and her position is with us. And then the state recovery office, so that's Doug Farnham and his team, and the committees, I'm sure, familiar with all of their work. And so they are currently 3, and I'll talk about that's a slight tweak from last year. But that structure is largely unchanged from FY26. Financial Services Division, I mentioned 10 folks. Their budget is primarily funded by interdepartmental transfers. In fact, entirely funded by interdepartmental transfers. They bill back for their services, the departments that they serve. And so the Office of Risk Management, I mentioned there are 3 people there. Their kind of administrative costs are funded out of 3 insurance internal service funds that we run. There's workers' comp, general liability, and auto liability, and then one called all other insurance, or it shows up sometimes in this document as AOI. That's kind of an aggregation of a lot of smaller policies. Some departments have different programmatic needs, so there's nothing necessarily statewide. They all get lumped into that, into all other insurances. And then the Office of Racial Equity. So created in 2019, starting with Susanna Davis, the executive director, has grown significantly, I'd say, in the last decade. They're now up to 6 positions total. There are 3 of them which are funded by general funds. That's the Division of Racial Justice Statistics. And there are 3 which are funded by the HRISF, and that's Susanna and then 2 other folks on the team. And that really, the rationale there, I think, has to do with kind of who's more internally focused and serving agencies versus general work.
I'm just going to start off by asking, I know that the Office of Racial Equality, some of the money is going to the Department of Health for health equity. Is there a position going with that, or is that just a money?
There was a transition. I had thought, and maybe I'll get over my skis here, but I thought that was a last year budget item for it was specifically related to health equity. Yeah. And no, there were no transfers of positions, just a shift in where the funding shows.
I think it was in the BAA too.
Maybe there was
It may have just showed in there because I think it was in the FY26 budget. So the old language is probably in there, even though we didn't change that.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. And then on the left side of this slide, there's just a chart visualization to help show the breakout of our funding. We're about 1/3 general funded, about 1/3 IDT, and about 1/3 ISF. The ISF, as I mentioned, is primarily the DHR ISF and the insurance ISFs, workers' comp, general liability, and all other. The IDT funds are a mix of the financial services division, which I mentioned are all IDT, and then also the recovery office. They're funded by a FEMA IDT, which rolls up into that category. And so the idea there being that much of their work is federally reimbursable related to the nature of the work that they're doing. So they show up there. The tiny sliver of gray of special funds, 125,000 this year, are clean water funds. And those flow through the agency of administration. Again, I think because they didn't have anywhere else to land, those are part of the Clean Water Board's annual recommendation. And that's a statutory process. Every year since I've been here, the governor's recommend has reflected their recommendations exactly. So we just plug this number in. And those are for anybody who's interested for stormwater, municipal stormwater utility incentive payments. So those flow through our office as well. So I'll pause there in case committee members have any questions or. Okay. Then moving on, I just get tripped up by which way to flip. Next slide, looking like this, it's a 27 summary and highlights. Not a ton going on. I mean, it's just kind of a sleepy year. I will highlight in the secretary's office, we have two things I would particularly flag. So there's the removal of one limited service position in the recovery office, a financial manager position, bringing their total down to 3. That was, I believe, an ARPA funded limited service position, and the funding was going away. And this was an anticipated sort of winding down of that work. So that's very much something we were anticipating. The $125,000 of clean water funding I just described, that when folks are going through the attachment B, if the folks through the attachment B will show us pretty significant down from last year. We had 730, I think, and that's partly because of like a one-time use that the Clean Water Board was recommending for a reserve for anticipated federal funding in the clean water space. But that request is not repeating this year. So there's a drop there. In the Office of Racial Equity, we're also removing a limited service position for whom the funding was going away. PDG stands for, thanks to somebody earlier for helping me with this, was Preschool Development Grant. They had a position associated with, this is a fairly sizable grant. I'm given to understand that lives primarily in the Agency of Human Services, but associated with the scope of work, there was a position, a limited service position in the Office of Racial Equity. That the work that position was doing has, I think, come to a close, and this is just winding down the position in alignment with the anticipated timeframe. In the financial services division, really it's the sort of usual annualization exercise, a lot of salary and benefits increases. There have been 10 people last year. There are 10 people again this year. The cost of paying those 10 people goes up. And in the Office of Risk Management on the administrative side, it's also a similar story, just mostly salary and benefits pressures. What I think is a little bit probably more, maybe of more interest to the committee, since these items will show up in every other budget you review. Somewhere on the attachment B, there will be a line for insurance costs, since these are internal service funds and get allocated across agencies. We self-insure for these items. With the help of an actuary, every year our actuary comes up with projections for what we need to charge departments based on actual claims experience. We have a conversation during budget development every year and set those rates. I put premium in quotes because it's not really a premium, but that's kind of how we talk about it. This is what we charge to other departments. So across the enterprise for workers' compensation, the premium collection is up about 13.4%. That's again primarily driven by claims experience. That's not out of the realm of experience. All 3 of these funds experience quite a bit of volatility just based on the market conditions. I was down the hall earlier telling your Senate counterparts, it's bamboozling to me, but like after the 2023 floods, our flood insurance actually went down, of all things.
But the workers' comp up 13.4 driven by claims. So there have been more claims, and that's why it's up? And are you noticing any trends or any concerns that you can address within departments? Or?
No, we actually, I appreciate the question, Madam Chair. We look at this a lot. Multiple times a year, and we meet with our adjusters to review claims experience. I think primarily what's driven this is actually not an increase in claims in like the incidence of claims, the number of claims, but cost of certainly have a couple high profile or a couple high ticket items. I mean, it's hard to like it's just really hard to anticipate, right? Because these are unfortunate events sometimes that certainly don't plan for, and we have done a lot over the years. I think there's actually the last summer that we met, there was a really interesting chart shared by the actuary showing like claims experience going back over the last decade for the state. And the trend was decidedly better, accelerating, particularly during the pandemic. And I mean, there's a lot of different categories, right, of within workers' comp that can cover a lot of things. But short answer to your question, I don't think there's anything that's causing us undue concern.
No pattern. So, yeah, and a sprained ankle is not as expensive as a broken back or something like that.
For instance, yeah, I would assume, or long-term health conditions or anything else
Right.
that can come up.
That's what-
It can be a diversity here.
But the balance, fund balance there is still negative.
Yeah, so good eye, Madam Chair. I included this chart because I didn't last year and I got follow-up questions about it from Representative Harrison. The workers' comp fund balance has been in deficit for a couple of years now. I think the trend that I would highlight is that, and this is a little confusing, you kind of have to read from right to left. The rightmost column is the balance at the end of FY '24. The middle column is the balance at the end of FY '25. We've gone from -3.5 million to 2.5 million. And that's actually in keeping with what we've been trying to do there. We've been slowly amortizing a deficit based on the premium rates. I mean, we could have amortized, it's an internal service fund, so we could have done it in 1 year, but then everybody's rates would have gone up 400%. So we've been sort of slowly managing the fund to get back to balance there. So continuing, anticipating continued progress there. On general and auto liability, also up about 5% from FY '26. Again, that is well within the bounds of what we typically experience, ups and downs. I think there were some significant downs in some of these last year, if I'm not making that up, or the year before. So like a 5-year average might be an even better way to look at this. And then all other insurance is down about 18%, but about 1.4 million based on the intricacies of those policies. So before I move on to the one-times and initiatives, I'll just pause in case folks have any questions on base. No.
Oh, you do? I do see one.
So back to the workers' comp, will you be adjusting rates or to continue to attack this fund balance?
Yes, Representative. So what's been budgeted in FY '27 is calculated to pay our anticipated obligations and our actuarial projections and partially help amortize this deficit. So that's the plan. I think we've been making pretty good progress. Of course, with any insurance pool, I'm sure my risk management colleagues would want me to say, I mean, you never know, right? It's the best you can do until some disaster happens, right? Or some really terrible event, but we're certainly managing towards positive fund balance. Okay, so then there's just one initiative to talk about, a one-time appropriation for Ideal Vermont. Inclusion, diversity, equity, action, and leadership. I think if I'm getting the acronym right, that is a program run by the Office of Racial Equity that works with municipal leaders across the state who have an interest in advancing diversity and equity initiatives at their local level. I think it's been a really great program. We've seen a lot of real success stories coming out of that. Committee members will remember last year, there was a request in the FY '26 governor's recommend for $220,000, 2 fiscal years. Ultimately, the bill as passed just had 110 for 1 year. So this is that request again for the next fiscal year.
And I'm trying to remember, do you know how many municipalities are taking advantage of this at this point?
That's a good question. I don't off the top of my head. I'd be happy to follow up. I'm sure the Office of Racial Equity could
Yeah.
provide a list. They may even be in there on their website. I don't know. I think my sense is it's, dozen, not hundreds. I mean, it's a pretty intensive,
There's a few you can do each year. You can't do 60 in a year.
Right.
You have to do a few. Yeah.
I think it's a pretty high touch program that the Office of Racial Equity works intensively with them. Okay. Any questions from folks on that? Okay, well, that sort of brings me to the end of the high level summary talking points. The budget book continues for 73 pages. There's a lot of detail here. To the chair's point, I guess in the interest of time and wanting to be respectful of the committee, I know you've got lots to do. I won't propose to walk through anything else in great detail, but I'm certainly happy to answer questions or touch on topics that are of interest.
Your bottom line is, I think, on page 11 of all the ups and downs, right? What the new budget is.
Yes. Page 11, yep.
And it looks like you're going down from 8,816,000 to 8,149,000.
Yeah, so I would humbly encourage the committee to take the total, really in any ups and downs by all funds with a grain of salt, just because there can be so many things happening in different funds. That down you're pointing out, Madam Chair, is primarily driven by the $630,000 drop in clean water fund.
Oh, the Clean Water Fund, right.
So that's making up the bulk of that. There's also some significant downs in the IDT column. It has to do with the fact that the PDG grants limited service
That's
was in
right.
our budget last year, and that was all IDT funded. And then also the recovery office limited service position that would have also been IDT funded. So that explains. a lot.
Right, so programs ending and clean water going down. Okay, yep. And you operate all these programs that we can't read because the typeface is so.
It's the challenge of fitting on paper, Madam Chair. Yes, so these, you can see they're broken down by kind of component unit, the Chief Performance Office, FSD, Financial Services Division, Racial Equity, Risk Management, Recovery Office. There is a lot going on in the Agency of Administration. And I guess I'll take the opportunity just to highlight, because I think this was explicitly in the request from the committee. So in terms of legislative initiatives, we had a busy summer, as I'm sure we all did. But among some of the things that landed with the Secretary's office specifically, our executive assistant, Chrissy Gilhooly, spent much of her summer supporting the redistricting task force. There was a lot that went into that in collaboration with her colleagues at Tax. We facilitated I was speaking with the representative earlier, a discussion among incumbent adult education and literacy providers around adult education and literacy funding. Which we're not by any means subject matter experts, but could serve.
You're a
as
neutral party.
a neutral convener, and certainly learned a lot. I was telling Representative Feltus it was really an education and a pleasure to get to know a lot of really hardworking, dedicated people in that space. So had some very engaged, intensive conversations in person here in Montpelier. Really appreciate the folks coming up from all the way from Bennington in some cases and down from the NEK. So that was a significant body of work. We convened similarly a series of stakeholder meetings with grants stakeholders, external grant folks across the state, representatives from the nonprofit sector, the RPCs, the League of Cities and Towns, to talk about Bulletin 5 specifically, which is the bulletin managed by the Agency of Administration governing state grants processes. That wasn't the focal point, but that's kind of the vehicle through which a lot of our grants policies are made. So we had there's been conversations over the last couple of years about grants, state grants administration and possible improvements. We wanted to, get in line with that conversation, ahead of that conversation, and seek some feedback from external partners. We held a series of meetings over the summer that brought folks together to take feedback. We had a cross section of grants, kind of head administrators from different departments, from AHS, AOT, ANR, to listen, to take some of that feedback and then work collaboratively on some updates, which we're really excited about. And so there's will be a revision to Bulletin 5 coming effective July 1st. That I think addresses a lot of concerns we heard, and we're hoping can and we've committed to, and I understand our ongoing kind of a regular quarterly convening with that group of external stakeholders, just to make sure those channels of communication stay open, that we're getting live feedback in terms of what's working, what's not working. It's of course always a balance between trying to make things as streamlined as possible and kind of user-friendly on the recipient end, and balancing our federal requirements to collect in our own state internal controls to ensure that we're being responsible stewards of public dollars, but
Without making them report so much that they have no time to actually implement the grant, because they're just reporting everything.
totally.
So you found that was a pretty worthwhile exercise to go through with all these folks, and it sounds like some things will change.
Well, we definitely did. I think we had some really productive conversations. I mean, I encourage folks, if they're interested, to reach out to representatives from Common Good and VLCT and, you know, get their perspective. But we were all feeling, I think, pretty positive coming out of those discussions. I mean, yeah, it's always a dialogue, right? And I'm sure there's a longer list of things they would love in an ideal world than we could easily implement or in fact legally implement under federal guidance. But I think where we landed in the middle, there were a lot of process improvements that are going to benefit actually both sides, to be frank. We got a lot of engagement from internal grants administrators saying like, yeah, why do we have like 4 different versions of this form, and could we have a standardized one? And so we're doing a lot of stuff, and big shout out to that team, which lives in finance and management. They've
Great. That's the sort of thing that is, we'd like to see. That's excellent.
we're pretty proud of that work.
Yeah.
The team's done a great job.
Excellent.
So that's just a cross section of some of the miscellaneous things. I'm sure there are others. I mean, a lot of what we do is just trying to keep the lights on in state government. It's been increasingly challenging, as this committee knows, right? Y'all do the same thing. And as the world experiences new and interesting levels of uncertainty and all kinds of facets, we just are often in a position of reacting as best we can and trying to anticipate what's.
And it's your agency, your department that is the one that sort of is the place where things land.
We're sort of the first line of
Oversight.
defense for better or for worse in many cases, but really benefit from this collaboration and support of a lot of different teams across the state. So maybe that's a good place for me to leave it unless.
That was a good overview.
Anybody have
Yeah. Anything your team wants to let us know about or highlight that we haven't heard about?
We have a great COO.
Okay. Hey, later.
Literally, actually.
Well, that's great. See, it's exciting stuff you guys do. It's important stuff you do. I mean, getting the grant, I know the grants thing, as a former recipient, when I ran an RDC and how long it took grants to get out. And so anything you can do to make it easier for everybody, including yourselves, why not, right? So, yeah, great. Great. Well, thank you for coming in. Thank you all for coming in.
Thank you so much. Now you get even better. I think libraries is up next. But
I know. Very exciting.
Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank
Take care. We're sort of back on track. I don't
Yeah.
need to.
I just told Kath that I was.
Okay. Okay. Great. So we have. Where are folks? They all look the same, I know. So we have 2 of you. Do you want to come, or one of you, or however you'd like to do it? Great. Oh, we have the, always love. Who doesn't love a library? You know. That's.
It's not your mother's library anymore.
I know.
It's not the
Same as it used to be.
No, it's
No.
better.
Amazing.
So welcome, and if you want to introduce yourself for the record and talk us about your budget, thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Delnau. I'm the state librarian and the commissioner of the Department of Libraries. And I appreciate your welcoming me here today to talk about the department's budget. I'm joined by my colleagues from the Department of Libraries, Tom McMurdo and Jeanette Schaefer. And I'm joined by the same crackerjack team of folks that supports Nick Kramer, who you just heard from our financial services division. So everything wonderful and tiny that fits on a page in this budget book and all of the numbers behind it, they support us with, and so much more. Our department operates within the Agency of Administration. If you'd like to visit the State Library, please do so. We're located in Barre at 60 Washington Street. We share space, we rent space from the Vermont Historical Society. And in that space, we have 18 permanent staff members and 2 limited service staff. The 2 limited service staff are working on 2 capital grant programs with one-time federal funds. I'll just share an overview of the department because we're doing a lot to support libraries in the state and to support state government, and then we can go through the budget book, and I'm happy to answer your questions. At the Department of Libraries, we still have physical collections, and we hope to have them forever because we have the Vermontiana collection. So if you're really interested in strange things about Vermont, please ask us your questions. We also have materials about legislative history, children's literature. We have a partial repository of federal documents. We have a growing public policy collection. So if you are running into any questions in your work as legislators, please let us know. We can help you. You all are eligible for library cards, and we're happy to do reference work for committees. And we also, of course, have a library science collection. Our state library also houses a network library of the Library of Congress's National Library Service. That's known as the ABLE Library. And the ABLE Library serves Vermonters who have qualifying visual and other print disabilities. So that is for folks who cannot use a standard print book. And that could be for a variety of reasons. If you break your arm, think ABLE Library. If you develop arthritis, think ABLE Library. Mom with macular degeneration, like me, think ABLE Library. So lots of folks qualify for those services. We're actually expanding ABLE Library services, focusing on youth. We have wonder book collections and other materials that help youth to use print materials. And some of those collections are books that have an audio component to them, for example. So many people who have learning differences are eligible for ABLE Library services through the department. The department not only has physical materials, we also have electronic collections. And that's something that Assistant State Librarian Tom McMurdo is really more expert in than me. But we have the Vermont Online Library databases, the Udemy Learning Platform, Peterson's Career and Test Prep Learning Platform. And we also have a collection of ebooks and e-audiobooks that are kind of a base collection of classics and perpetual use materials. And that is called the Palace Project app. All of those materials are available to all Vermonters, yourselves included. Again, get yourself a state library card if you don't have one yet. But also, if you have your public library card and you're using the public library locally, say you're at the Bennington Library or the Ilsley Library, you can just go in and ask them to help you to get connected with those resources. The idea is that if we provide that basic electronic resource, then individual libraries that don't have the resources to pay for those materials, those electronic databases and ebooks and audiobooks and learning platforms, if you're up in Canaan, Vermont, and the budget is small, the people in that community still have access to those materials. And if you're in a community that has more means, then you can focus on supplemental materials and enhanced collections. We provide access to everything that we have, digital collections and electronic resources, through our reference services of the department. And we also have a very active interlibrary loan program. There is never a book a Vermonter cannot get at their library. You just need to say, it's not here today, can I get it through interlibrary loan? And that sets in motion a wonderful, we should do a film about it, following the courier around the state, but we'll pull a book off of the shelf in your community and they'll bring it over to your community. And it's a way that we keep costs down throughout the state. And we use some of our federal grant money from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to fund that service to fund grants for the courier program. Yes.
Can you go online and search for holdings in your library?
You can. We actually administer, this is getting a little bit wonky. So if I go too far into librarian land, pull me back, please. But we have something called the Clover platform, and it basically does live searches of all of the libraries that participate around the state. So you can see what's checked in, not just on your library's shelves, but what's checked in someplace else so that you can borrow those materials and have a good success rate. And I want to share, Clover doesn't extend to New York or Nebraska or California. But if there's a book you cannot get in Vermont, we at the Department of Libraries have a staff member who basically just all day long moves books from out of state to our state. And so this is a really great way to keep costs down for local municipal library budgets, for incorporated library budgets as well. And it's a way to really make materials available to Vermonters. And it's something that we spend a lot of time and energy on because we really want to encourage people to use their resources in the best way possible. We're really excited. Last year, we were able to work with University of Vermont and get them in the Courier network and get them on that Clover database so that so everyone has access to their collections as well at their public libraries all around the state.
Periodicals also.
Some periodicals can move. We do it in different ways. Sometimes you might get a PDF of an article, but we can help you with either books or periodicals. And some libraries will even send media and other materials. So I just want to mention, because you or your constituents might have needed this, the state library used to include a very large law library. Some of you who have been in the legislature for a long time will remember that. We no longer have all of those resources. So the department makes an annual grant of $90,000 to the Vermont Law and Graduate School so that everyone in Vermont has access to a robust law library and a librarian who staffs that program. They actually exceed the bounds of what we're asking of them. We're asking for about 40 hours a week of reference service, but they make the collection open to folks even when their dedicated CLIC librarian is not there. And CLIC stands for Community Legal Information Center.
Okay.
So on that, at some point you had conversations with every page to say you want to close this library. And from a distance, without what's going on in your conversations, we can go, oh, that's awful. Can you just share for a couple minutes, like what was it like to get the notification or to come to the conclusion that this was going to happen and how you found the best solution?
I was not the state librarian at the time that this change took place. My understanding is that there was a gradual shift over time, and that initially there was a law librarian position that was not filled quickly and then was cut. And at that point, when the law books become out of date, it's very difficult. If you think about the green books in this room and the pocket parts, if you don't keep a law book up to date, it's actually worse to have it on the shelf than not to have it on the shelf. So the books in the state library's law library collection, many of them became less useful, and a decision was made, I believe, involving the legislature at the time to use this approach. The thing I watch for as the state librarian is the health of the Vermont Law and Graduate School. And if they're performing a service right now that they're doing very well, if anything were to happen to that law library, if anything were to happen, we've seen many libraries of academic institutions that have called us in the past couple of years to say, we're shuttering this library. Do you want any of our materials? And in that case, we do probably the saddest job a librarian can do, which is go and cherry pick Vermontiana and other topics of interest to Vermonters for the state library collection. It would be very difficult to build the collection that the Vermont Law and Graduate School has now. So that's just something that we should all be aware of. If there's ever an issue with their continuity, there would be a gap here for Vermonters. Does that help to answer your?
Yes, because it just gives us more than just the bullet point that
Yeah.
Sharon. So no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And a lot of Vermonters actually make use of the law library.
We get a report from the law library related to their grant each year, and they have robust numbers. They serve both Vermonters who are going about their everyday lives. They also do a lot of legal reference correspondence with people who are incarcerated. I can share their annual grant report back to the committee if you'd like, because I didn't come with those numbers today, but it is well used. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, just want to be, we're spending this money. Is it worth it? Right?
Well, I would say it's definitely worth it when you look at the the scope of what they're performing. They've actually begun working with some local public libraries to try to have more direct access from different kind of nodes around the state. So that's something, again, that exceeds the scope of
Yeah.
the grant that we wrote for them. And I've been here since about this time in 2022, and this $90,000 amount has remained stable. So I think it's a pretty good deal for the service that they provide. And the law librarian is very engaged with the Vermont library community and does things like continuing education through the department to let people know about her services, what she can do, when it's appropriate to refer people to her, and how she can sort of teach local librarians to access some of the materials remotely as well.
So a lot of stuff's online these days.
Yeah.
So what proportion or what characterizes parts that we wouldn't be able to find online?
As far as the legal references, well, I would say that the law librarian from CLIC, from the Vermont Law and Graduate School, would be better positioned to answer that than me because she knows those materials so intimately. But when I think about it in our own state library collection, and I think about the materials we have, a lot of older materials have not been digitized. And in the state of Vermont, there's not been very much money put toward digitization. It's seen as an extra. And so when you're looking for current legal documents, you would likely be able to find many current things online. When you look at the federal repository collection that we have at the state library, most new things that are published by the feds are being born digital. So they're not even sending us the paper copy, but things from the past, we are still maintaining on the shelf. So it's really, some of it is the more historical things. You're more likely to find them in print format because no one has the resources to digitize them. But it's also important to remember that print has persisted. And if you were to do research into a news story from 50 years ago, I would recommend that you come to the state library and use some of our materials in our collection because the digital record hasn't extended back that far.
Do you have a cost estimate of what it would take to digitize everything?
I can develop one. I know that our colleagues at the Historical Society have been looking at the idea of having a digital asset management system and have brought some proposals in the past, and that people haven't had the resources to really support that. But that's something that I think would be a great benefit to the state to have a digital asset management system. We were participating along with VSARA, the State Records Administration, and Middlebury College and the Historical Society. Tom McMurdo, Assistant State Librarian, was working on a committee to jointly administer Vermont's node of the Digital Public Library of America. There's been a lot of leadership change there, and the materials were all housed at Middlebury and still are housed at Middlebury, but with the kind of changes in DPLA, the Digital Public Library of America, we decided to pull back the resources we were putting there until they sort themselves out and we determine if we want to continue there. It would be nice to have a Vermont resource for Vermonters that was more stable. I will say that, but it's something that's it's a very costly endeavor. And if you outsource it to someone else, you're sending all of the materials to them. And so there are different ways people do this work, but it either involves staff time and equipment on site, which I've seen, but not done myself. When I was working in San Francisco Public Library, the scanning team was there from the Internet Archive, scanning many, many materials. It's quite labor intensive, but it's really a matter of where are the resources and do people value the historical record in that way and want to make it accessible? But I do have to say that you can see that if you just rely on the digitized material or the digitization of the resource, it may not actually be as reliable in some cases as the print resources in the long term, because as the platforms change and the record files change, you can run into some real issues with continuity of access.
File names.
Lynn?
Yeah, thank you. Last year, we had the Institute of Museum and Library Services was at one point. Okay. Can you go over what's happened since then?
Oh, sure. It's actually been a bit of a roller coaster. As you'll remember, last year I gave budget testimony and then I came back to talk about the IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services funding. Our budget, if you look at page 4, I think it's page 4. No, page 5. No, page 4. I was right. If you look at page 4, there's a little pie chart down at the bottom, and you'll see the blue portion that is about 31% of our total funding. That comes from one source, from this grants to states allotment from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. The federal administration last year said that they were cutting it entirely and getting rid of this IMLS entirely. That has not come to pass at this point. We still have funding from IMLS. There was a court case that I believe has gone to appeal now. There was a ruling in favor of the states that had sued the federal government, saying that they needed to maintain the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We're continuing to wait for updates from IMLS and from the federal government about funding for even this year. They're on a continuing resolution. They haven't made the full award statements. And I'm looking at Assistant State Librarian Jeanette Schaefer, who's nodding, so I know that I'm on the right track. So typically they would have many, many months ago given us an award letter for the entire year's funding. This year, they've been telling us every few months that we're on a continuing resolution. We can't tell you the full amount yet, but they continue to reimburse the state, so that's good. As far as the funding for the future, there's a bill that, let's see, I think this would have been not this past weekend, but the week before. The House and Senate Appropriations Committees reached an agreement on the Labor, Health, Human Services, et cetera, the LHHS Act. That's the bill that has the IMLS funding in it. The funding level in that bill is 181 million plus. So it's actually up a little bit over the 2025 allocation at the federal level. So assuming that that bill goes through and that there's not a shutdown or some other thing that happens between now and then, it seems like what the legislature at the federal level has said is that IMLS is important and they are funding it at a little bit higher of a level in their appropriations bill. So it's still fingers crossed and waiting to hear the final word on that.
So we learned today in our caucus with Representative Ballard, who is here from Washington, that the House passed out the bills. There were 4 separate bills, of which yours is in one of them, but the Senate has decided to combine them all into one with a straight up or down vote. And with what's happening in Minnesota and elsewhere, the DHS portion is a question of whether that would sink everything or whether they'll be able to pull them apart. So I guess it's still a wait and see.
I've heard that as well. So you have it on better, Representative Ballard is more expert on it than me, but I've heard that same narrative about, I think everyone was excited it was going through. It was a bipartisan bill. People were pleased by that. And I'm very hopeful that this portion of funding will be approved and that will continue on. And our budget is really predicated on that. And if there were a change, we'd have to come back and talk about some very challenging circumstances for the department. Before we move to more questions, I do want to just make sure I say this because I've got staff back at the department who do really important work and I want to be sure to call out what they're doing so that they hear it. One of the really big things that we do is supporting public libraries. And a lot of how we do that is by offering continuing education or workforce development for library staff at libraries around the state. We primarily focus on public library training. And we have something called the Certificate of Public Librarianship to help people who don't have a master's degree in library science to actually provide services to their public in their communities. And we also provide consultation to library staff and trustees. We do that in person, but we do everything primarily. Our main method for delivering services now has moved online. During the pandemic, we found we got a lot higher attendance at our continuing education. I still make a point of getting out there, and so do the consultants. But in order to save money, we go together and we go out less. But we do a lot more Teams calls and phone calls with folks. We also administer state and federal surveys. So if you have questions about public libraries and their health, we can give you that data. And we also grant funds to public libraries to offset expenses of participating in that interlibrary loan courier program, and also for summer reading for youth. And while we're talking about youth, I want to just be sure that you know that reading begins in the public library when infants come with their parents. You don't need to be in school to start getting ready to read and ready to learn. And so a lot of what we're doing is focusing on increasing opportunities for public library staff to take training and continuing education at the department, folding in a lot of those same best practices that you'll hear from literacy specialists, but really focusing on training the parents. And a lot of it is done in a gentle way. You're just modeling how to read with kids, how to ask questions about the pictures in the book or about the story, or what do you think will happen next, but really developing the idea with the parents and the kids that they're going to have a daily practice of reading and learning together. And that's something that's very important, I think, for moving the needle with childhood literacy. And it's something Vermont hasn't focused as much on. So we are really trying to push some resources and attention in that direction through training for library professionals in the state. And we've also been doing great work with Jeanette's team, has been doing great work with STEAM training. We've had some science and technology programs with partners from the Echo Center. We've recently sent telescopes out and like these NASA backpacks that families can check out from their libraries. So there's a lot going on in the public library. It is not your mom's public library, like you were saying a minute ago. But it still is your mom's public library, because I know my mom goes to her library in Northfield and thinks it's just like the bee's knees. So we're really doing a lot for all different ages and supporting people wherever they are in their lifelong learning journey. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I hope I didn't talk too much about libraries. I get pretty enthusiastic.
Dave, you have a question?
Well, I just noticed on your slide presentation, it's page 30, your supply budget for books and periodicals is cut 23%. FY 27 versus last year.
Mhm.
Overall supply budget down 24%.
Yeah.
Can you make that work?
We can. Something that is a pressure for us, and I'm going to probably wave my hands a lot in the next few minutes, but when you're thinking about every year, the increased costs of staffing and benefits, the salaries and benefit costs, they're going up. The federal funds don't go up. The federal funds have really remained pretty level or even dipped slightly. So as there are increased costs of staffing and benefits or the contracts for things like the Vermont Online Library, there could be increased pressure on us to determine where to make some cuts. We've done some shifting toward, we've done some shifts away from as many new physical materials. So that means that we need fewer processing supplies. That helps. I mean, I'd rather have tons of money to buy all the books and all the online resources in the world, but reasonably speaking, there are a lot of competing pressures. And so keeping within our, the recommendations of kind of sustaining our growth in a responsible way, we've made some cuts to the supplies that we need fewer of right now.
Curious, I think libraries do so many wonderful things and it's so cool. How does a library define success?
That is a really difficult question.
Yeah.
This is.
It's not really working. I mean, you can track number of visits and people returning.
Yeah.
That's probably success and, kids are coming in and after school programs, but I'm just, wondering how you all think of it. How do you know libraries?
Well, when we're looking at the metrics year over year and we're seeing the circulation is going back up. So remember during the pandemic, library visits and library circulation took a nosedive because people were afraid of going in public and sharing physical materials. When we're looking at the statistics that we gather every year for the Institute of Museum and Library Services Public Library Survey, we actually see that in Vermont, we've climbed out of that hole and we are circulating more interlibrary loan materials. We're circulating more physical materials. We have more programs. We have more people attending programs. So by pretty much every more library visits. So by most metrics, I think if we're looking at it in a data-driven way, that looks like success to me. For me, there's the data and then there's the qualitative component. And I think if a Vermonter can go to their library and find a safe and welcoming spot and whatever their information need is or whatever they want a space to do in their community, that they have that space to do it there. To me, I think that that's success. And we visit a lot of libraries and I look at the programming going on at the Morrisville Centennial Library and the library director's got this calendar of everything happening every minute and visited for Capital for a day. And there was a group of high schoolers who were doing a writing project. They met every Friday for writing club. And then there were kids doing a craft program. And they were telling us about how upstairs there's a community play that uses the space to practice and rehearse before they actually put the play on in the library, in the reading room. I mean, to me, that looked like success. And I usually find that when I'm visiting public libraries in Vermont, I almost always find that people come up and say, this place is really important to me. And you think about every public library has, both municipal and incorporated, they have a board of trustees of 5 people who are like pouring their life's blood into keeping that institution afloat. And it's really a place where civic engagement is happening. And to me, I would say, if it's important to even a few people in the community, it's a success. But I think that what we're seeing is many people care about their public libraries.
Yeah. Agree. Dave?
I just have to share a quick story. I live in Morristown. Great library. My high school coach said, will you help me? I want to capture the press releases after our games 53 years ago. I'm writing a little book. I went to the library and there it is. The newspapers were all digital. And I said, this is amazing. And in an afternoon, we played 20 games. We captured it all and I didn't even know the resource existed. The
Yeah.
librarian, let me help you, that kind of thing. Great.
And if I'm not mistaken, at that library, there is actually an archival space up on the second
Yeah.
floor,
Yeah.
off of the meeting room where you can do modern dance while looking at the community graveyard.
I haven't done that dance up there.
It's on grade.
Yeah, I think they can be the heartbeat of a community.
Oh, they
That's kind of the success.
Absolutely.
Describe, as you know, I have the Ilsey Library in
Yeah.
Middlebury, and we're undergoing a massive, $17 million renovation. The local bank lent us part of its building to have a mini library for the year and a half while the construction is happening.
Wow.
And somebody else offered they needed space, they couldn't cover all the books in the new place. The first company that offered has a huge building, but they grow pot in there and they decided they couldn't leave the books because it was all gonna smell like.
Oh my
gosh. They had to find a different place. It was very nice of them, but because it didn't work, so we found a different place. But everybody came together to make it work and it's great.
It's really impressive what your community has done to support the library, and it's a real
Yeah.
testament to the importance of the Ilsley for Middle.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I think the heartbeat of the community is, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I just want to say that I noticed in my own experience when I used to take my kids to the library. It was pretty straightforward. You got a book, into the shelves, you know. If there was a activity going on, it was somebody reading a book to the kids. Nowadays, when I go with my grandchildren, or when I have gone recently with my grandchildren, they've got games, coloring, they have a whole activity room full of all kinds of things that has nothing to do with reading, but is really, you can spend all day there. It's very engaging. It's a much broader effort than what.
Yeah,
They have the reading thing, you know, you do that.
you're learning in lots of ways.
Lots of different learning.
Yeah, I think that idea of multiple literacies is something that we're really working with librarians to support. Many librarians are kind of leading us along that way. When we look at the story walks that you see outside at libraries, you know, we send out story walk kits. Have you seen these? It's like somebody deconstructs a picture book and we laminate it and then we put it on a stick and they place it in the community. So you might experience a book while you're walking around. That was born right here in Montpelier at the Kellogg Hubbard Library. And when I was working in San Francisco, we implemented a story walk. And
In Middlebury, my
Really?
substitutes now in elementary school, they go for these walks in the neighborhood right behind the school and they.
Yeah.
Really?
So
And you
that's
read
what
a
it's called.
book.
They read a book along the way.
Yeah.
And when they were building our town hall, do you remember, some of you, Mike Mulligan and his steam
Oh my
shovel?
God.
So we were building the town hall and there was so they put laminated things all around the chain link fence about Mike Mulligan at kids' height, so they could all read Mike Mulligan as they were building the town hall. We don't have Mary Ann in the basement, but you know.
Well, that's the kind of thing where you'll have a librarian who's doing something great. And what we like to do at the department is provide opportunities for them to share with their colleagues. So one of the things that Jeanette's team and Tom's team do is that they host these roundtables. And that's really an opportunity for peer-to-peer troubleshooting and peer-to-peer problem solving. A lot of people in rural Vermont libraries are feeling pretty isolated. Not everyone's in a big, beautiful new building. You know, the Milton Library is really nice to visit and we've got a pretty big staff. And a lot of librarians are just there by themselves. And so we give opportunities for folks to convene on different themes like youth services or cataloging or interlibrary loan. So all different things, technology now. Jeanette just hosted the first facilities roundtable, which is something that I think will take off once people start thinking about it a little bit. So we kind of hear common themes in our consultation, and then we have these roundtables where we can meet with people and connect with them and just give them a place to get together and share so that everybody's not reinventing the wheel locally. And when they are doing something great, it can be magnified. Vermont's different from other states because each of these libraries is operating independently. So, you know, I'm not the boss of the librarians in the state. We're there to support them, but they all are reporting to their own municipality and the board or the Incorporated Library Board. So this is a way that the department really fosters that connection, and that's some of the great work that our consultants do.
Always fun to have you come in.
I'm happy to talk with you
I
always.
go to my library, right? Thank you so much, and thank the whole team for what you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your support.
So committee, that is our last budget for the day. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., the Veterans Home will be in. They'll be on Zoom. And then the treasurer at 9:30. So we'll start right at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Okay.